What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Stacked Sessions. We've got a special guest joining us today. His name is Mike Schwartz, Director of Competitive Esports with Immortals Gaming Club. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going pretty well. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into your current role with Immortals, I'd love to touch on your early career in esports. So let's start from the beginning. I believe you started out as a player development coach for CLG. Talk to us about how you got into all that.
Yeah, actually, it's pretty interesting story. I was actually applying to law school at the time, back in late 2015, early 2016. So I was just on Reddit one night on the league sub, and I saw um, this job posting for a player development coach for CLG, and I looked at the description. I was like, this job description is looking for an adult, and I think I'm an adult, so I should apply for it. And I was like, listen, like I don't expect to hear anything back, but it just seemed interesting enough to at least apply. Worst case, you don't hear back, and I was going to law school, and that would have been. Um, Took my LSAT again, applied for some more schools, got accepted to schools, was like debating on where I was going, and then around Christmas, I got a message back from Devin Nash, the CEO at the time, and he was like, "Hey, your application was good. We'd love to talk to you at some point in the near future." And I was like, "Okay, cool." Like, go through a few phases. Interview with him went pretty well. Talked to Tony Zix over at 100 Thieves now, and then basically the next day they were like, "You want to fly out to California and be a player development coach?" I was like, "Sure, sweet, awesome." So I did that. I decided to, like if it worked out, great. If it didn't work out, law school is still going to be there for me at the end of the year. Um, but flew to California around January, end of January, and then just started working with the CLG team at the time. And honestly, that's where it started. I worked with them. That was the team that went to MSI. That was the team that went into making it back to Worlds that year. Afterwards, I transitioned over to work with the CS:GO team for a bit. Once that team was disbanded in late 2017, that's when I ended up making the shift over to Immortals when they had the Los Angeles Knight Overwatch League slot. So, and then I've been there ever since. So.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty big change from law school to full time esports. I was gonna say, just looking at the years you were at CLG, you were part of some pretty memorable runs. A couple of top three LCS finishes, that trip to Worlds you mentioned. What was all that like?
I mean, honestly, it was a great experience. Within my first 2 months, I'd never flown really anywhere. I think in my life, and it was like go to California. Then literally within a month, it was, hey, you're going to Katowice for IEM, which we had like a pretty disappointing finish for. And then after that, it was the team was competing at a high level, which is really nice to be able to join a team that's already had Aphromoo, Darshan, Hugi, Smithy, and Sixan. It had a bunch of veterans, a bunch of young players. So it was really cool to experience that. Tony was a great coach. Being able to work with him for the year, definitely learned a lot, about league and everything. So, working with those guys was a really great experience, and actually getting to see them compete at the highest levels for a North American team, especially, I think was insane. Getting to travel to China, Vegas for finals, then to China for MSI, where we had that run, which is like probably one of the highlights of my career, honestly, really early on. And then boot camping in Korea, going back to San Francisco for Worlds, like everything was, it was awesome. It was just a great experience.
Yeah, can't ask for much better of a first year in esports. Yeah. So I got to ask, what's the Cinderblock story?
Oh, no, Cinderblock story. So yeah, basically, I convinced a group of professional League of Legends players to find a Cinderblock. It's based on like a team building activity where effectively, you want to get them to work towards a common goal and like create a better culture. And I think that was the main mission I had when I was the player development coach for the league team was Hugi and 6A were newer players to the team. The team is coming off of being successful, and you want to make sure you build a culture of success. And I think, way early esports, it was. I remember my first day pretty well, actually. I arrived the night before to CLG at like midnight. Met Smithy, who was half asleep, because we shared a room actually my first year there. And then it was like went to bed, woke up the next morning, and they were like, okay, scrims are at 12:30, and then nobody like woke up until like 11 o'clock, and then they got Chipotle, and then they started scrimming for the day. I was like, this doesn't seem correct. Like this, we should work on like schedule and structure, and and ask people like what they were doing, how they were competing. Like I should talk to all these guys and figure out what's going on. So as we got closer and closer to playoffs, I felt that making sure those bonds and like the expectations and the trust was really solidified. So I mean, we had gone on we had the bye week. Once we had secured that, we took some time off. We went on the weekend. We went for a nice hike. We just kind of gathered around. It was like a waterfall over in like an Arcadia, like Chantry area. We just talked about like what competing meant to us and like what our expectations were, what our goals were. Before playoffs, and then we dove into a pretty rigorous like playoff prep routine. And finding the cinder block was part of that whole endeavor, right? Like we wanted to make sure that as they were like looking for this thing, which by the way, like it wasn't on the property at all, right? Like I hid it in like our director of ops house at the time. Like he just took it with him. Um, but overall, it was like they're hunting for this thing together. They had to invest time in it. They had to like think about it. They had to work together. And if they didn't, they got punished. And it was like, there were like pseudo like joke punishments, like they had to do stuff. But it was all like, putting them under some extra stress, but making sure they work together to like reach a common goal and like, just a general like longer term team building exercise before like a meaningful event to build that up. And it was fun, to do it. Works once, I would say, for a team. So now I can't do it ever again. But I mean, hey, we won the split, so I'll take it.
I love it. You used the silver bullet. After that, you went to go work for the Overwatch team.
Mhm.
You have the unique experience of having spent considerable time with both the Overwatch League and now Riot LCS, both
Mhm.
pre and post LA Valiant. What are some differences between the two? Is there anything that Overwatch League does well that LCS could learn from?
I think, I mean, for working at both, right? I think, both publishers are very hands-on with how they approach things. Obviously, they're growing their ecosystems. They want to make sure that their key product is actually, in the vision that they expect it to be. I would say Blizzard is definitely, they take a different approach to a lot of things. Number one is like the city-based league that they have, right? So there's an engagement to a local audience that I think Riot hasn't capped on, and that's definitely interesting. COVID really derailed that, which is just outside of anyone's control. So it would have been interesting to see what would happen if we were able to activate our home markets a little bit more. I mean, we were based in LA, so it's a little easier for us. We did share with the Gladiators, but I think when you're looking at the entire product itself, it would have been interesting to see if like we had a full year of travel to home cities. The Dallas event was really cool, which is the one we ended up going to pre-COVID. So seeing a whole year of that would have been really interesting, and the ones in China were awesome. So seeing that local activation, I think, is something that Blizzard could have done really well. And from the first event, it was pretty cool. So we'll see what happens if Riot takes a page of that book as we get towards engaging like North American fan bases a bit more, or global fan bases. The studio in Santa Monica is super small, so outside of the temple events, like maybe more frequent, traditional sports type venues would be utilized. But I think that's really just like the key difference is like how they were activating. Riot, I think, delivers a pretty compelling product, right? Globally, it's Worlds the highlight of the year. So definitely some interesting takes there for each of them.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because I think that's the first thing that comes to mind too. The whole city-based team franchise model that
Mhm.
Overwatch and I think Call of Duty League uses now too. But
Right.
Riot doesn't seem to have followed suit yet. But that could solve or exacerbate some of the ping issues that people are talking about so much with solo queue and
Mhm.
all the teams being in LA and the servers being in Chicago. So okay, tell us about your current role now. What is being director of competitive esports entail?
Yeah. So director of esports, it's many hats, right? It's effectively being the GM for all of the teams in a sense. Overseeing the operation of the Valorant team, League of Legends team. Right now are like the two key focuses. But it really just is games that we want to expand into. Thinking more broadly about the ecosystem and how Immortals is positioned in it. I think that's the prime function of what I end up being responsible for. I have a hand in everything, I would say, from content to marketing to partnerships to competitive roster construction, which is like where it really, I'm not out every single day like scouting players, but at the same time, like you understand like around free agency, I'm going to be working, primarily in that regard. Whereas, to kind of paint a picture for what I did, it's, around like August, September, it was looking for a head coach for the team since we had parted ways earlier on in the year for the league side, building out that structure, seeing what the vision would be, what assets would be available to us, then subsequently going out and signing those players, and then coming up with a narrative for what the team was going to be, for the year, and then just ensuring you're on track and like you're selling it to partners or sponsors. Like, what is that narrative? How are we engaging with the fan base? How are we engaging with our partners? What's marketed for us? And then is there any pivot points, right? Is there an acquisition we could make that would make us, change that narrative a little bit? Is there something we can do to get ahead of the curve? Is there a new esports title we can enter into? Or, really that's kind of the broader strokes of what I do. So it's a lot of different responsibilities. It's really fun that I get to touch on all these different aspects and guide people in different ways. But at the end of the day, it's about being competitive and working on the team side and making sure that they have all the resources that they need to be successful.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So, without giving away your secrets, what's scouting like for LCS? Are you mostly looking at collegiate, amateur, academy players, or are you going even beyond that, maybe high school?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say, I think if there's a player that's standing out, I think everybody's looking at them, and it doesn't really matter where they come from in that sense. I mean, for us, we have Raze and Destiny, who are both OS players who came into the LCS this year with the relaxed import for the OS guys after the OPL kind of disbanded. Um, you know, we've looked at players that are in collegiate, we've looked at players that are in amateur, that are in academy, other LCS players that we think maybe haven't had a fair shake, pretty much everybody. You don't want to close yourself off from scouting. I think there's artificially restricting your pool, especially when you're in kind of a position to rebuild. It's not like a good look. But, in terms of like what we're looking for, I mean, at the end of the day, we're looking for mechanically skilled players. I think if you have good coaches, everyone's coachable at some level. So you want to optimize for getting the most talent you can.
Definitely. And you're splitting your time between League and Valorant. Is it pretty even split of time?
I would say, I mean, I try to devote attention, like right now, it's mostly LCS focused, given that Valorant is on a bit of a break before Masters. They're practicing. I trust the guys to run that, Packing and Gumba. So I check in, we talk about stuff, if there's any acquisitions we want to make, or, what our scouting list looks like going into the future. But ultimately, like once Masters comes around, I'll probably be more engaged with it, post Masters, to see if there's anything we want to do with the, with the roster, the staff, what we need to do to maintain our lead. I think we're in a pretty good space in the Valorant side of things. So, I tend not to be very hands-on. I've trusted these guys to run things. That's what they're hired for. They do a great job, and I'm not getting in their way. I'm only going to be here as a resource for them to look to improve.
That's a great place to be in, and you've got double the chances to score a ticket to Iceland for MSI and Masters with those two teams.
Yeah, it'd be great. I could save. Listen, if we could qualify, I'd save on the plane tickets and the. Just get one at the end of the month or one at the beginning of the month and the end, and just stay over there for a bit of time, which would be nice. I'd like to get out of the apartment for a little bit.
Yeah, have you been to Iceland before? Not a bad place to be stuck.
No, I haven't actually. I've in terms of that, I think, like, in terms of European travels, I've been like Spain, Ukraine, Poland a couple of times, but never Iceland, which it looks like a beautiful place. So I'd love to go.
Yeah, I'm sure the Riot LCS creatives are going to go crazy. There's no shortage of inspiration though over there. Yeah. Okay. So talk to us about the Immortals League season so far. You guys started off with the Academy roster playing in the lock-in, kicked off the regular season with that incredible upset over Team Liquid, birthed all the revenge memes after that, and now you guys are about halfway through the split, sitting at 5-7. How does this stack up to expectations?
Yeah, I mean, pretty bluntly, right? Like, we're about where I would expect us to be at this point, given the visa stuff that we had at the beginning of the year, which surprisingly everyone was like, oh, these guys are here super late. And it's like, if you look at what we were doing, we were fully rebuilding our roster. So a lot of teams that had these players already under visas, like, it was much easier to either bring them back into the country or just have them here and extend their status, or they had pre-existing visas. I believe one case there was a B visa, which is like a visitor one that you could get. You could come into the country on that, and then you could just change status. You just can't work in between the transition, which isn't too long. You pay, premium processing and stuff. So, there's a lot of benefits that teams had when they, kept that talent, or when they just shuffled in North America, because you can just change the visa status, and it's pretty simple, actually. For us, we were bringing in brand new players, so that's where we had a little bit of the hiccups. We got everyone here around about a week after I actually had him slated to get here, which wasn't bad at all. So given that, and the practice we had where we had like the mixed roster with the academy team and then fully academy playing, like, for the amount of practice we had, Destiny got here at the end of January. Like, we played our first full game the following weekend, like, and upset CL. I think that's pretty solid. I think that there's definitely games that we should have won that we didn't. But overall, I mean, we're kind of like in that gatekeeper pack with like Team Liquid and Evil Geniuses right now to contest for playoffs. And I mean, if you told me, hey, Mike, you're going to rebuild your entire roster, you're going to have like 3 or 4 weeks of practice, you're going to play your academy team for a bit, and your LCS team is going to be contending for a playoff spot in its first split back, like, yeah, I'd be pretty happy with that expectation. And the players and staff know as much too. Like, this is about growth. It's not about just immediately coming out of the gate and smashing everybody. I'm not going to complain if we did. But yeah, overall, you have to be realistic. You have to understand what this roster is meant to do, and it's a longer-term project. And I think consistently we've seen improvements for all the players, and it's great to have that blend of rookies and some veterans, who maybe didn't have like a great showing. People were memeing Destiny and Xerxes because they were on like Origin, which was 10th place, and like, oh, you're getting 10th place players. And it's like, you can clearly see that they weren't the issues on the team. It was just the entire environment, I think, that led to those types of performances. And they're kind of getting that redemption shot here and proving that they deserve to be the highest level of play.
For sure. I mean, you guys are one game behind that three-way tie for fourth right now in the LCS. Coming from last place finish and summer split last year, I
Yeah.
think I'd say Immortals is looking pretty competitive this year with the full roster rebuild, and you guys have the
Mhm.
staff overhaul as well. So the organization has a winning mindset right now. It really looks like.
Yeah, I think it's really in terms of I think the parity in the league right now, you can definitely see that every team can take games. Right, Golden Guardians beat 100 Thieves. CLG took a game off. Just one recently. I forgot who their last game was, but I mean, like they've had leads. I think in almost every single game early. They have. I think they're 11 for 11 in first bloods as well, or 11 for 12, I guess, at this point. Um, so you definitely can't write anybody off. I think Cloud9 has a bit of a step above everybody else right now, which is expected for this year. But I think anybody can beat anybody. That's a great story. It's a great thing for competitive League of Legends in North America. So I'm happy to say that we can beat anybody. We can also lose anybody. We have to keep that mentality as we kind of finish out the season.
For sure, that's part of what makes esports so great. From a player development perspective, since you've played that role before, how big was the lock-in experience for the academy players?
I think it was really good for the academy guys. Giving them a taste of the LCS, being able to play one of the things I think that went by the wayside is if you looked at the second game against 100 Thieves where we had Tapoon playing Someday into the Camille into the Jax matchup. Like Tapoon was like lane gapping Someday pretty hard on the Camille. Obviously, I understand he was playing to the weak side, and Someday was kind of taking it there and then ended up coming back later in the game. But the narrative there is wow, this guy is laning against one of the best laning top laners in the LCS, and he just came off of playing in OPL and then went to Worlds last year. So from that perspective, it's I feel like it's valuable to give them confidence that they can compete with these guys across the board. You've seen Pollock had played in the LCS last year in the first couple of games when we had Smithy on the bench, showed some really good signs, especially early game, and has been working to improve his overall gameplay. Pretty's been a really great addition for the mid lane, giving a lot of structure and voice to that team. Keith and Joey have been staples kind of in the academy system. Joey had some international experience with Team Liquid, so there's a good mix on our team for our academy program as well as some of the veterans and some of the rookies as well. And for us as a whole program, it's about finding the core pieces for Immortals going forward, right? We want everybody to feel like they have a chance to become an asset, not just here, but at other teams. And hopefully we can showcase that as a platform. That's kind of the bigger goal. But, to the point of the Locket tournament, it was something that had minimal implications for us competitively. We couldn't get maximal value for our main roster, so we just used it to scrim for them. And then the academy team, it's a good baseline to show where they actually are. They almost beat FlyQuest, I think, in that tournament too. So it's if your academy team is equivalent to a lower level LCS team in a sense of where we are in the standings, if they can compete with FlyQuest, I think that's a pretty good sign.
Sure. So. Yeah, it's certainly been fun watching everyone step up. So wanted to talk to you a little bit about the business of esports, broadly. What advice would you give to younger esports fans on how to break into the industry, if they may not have the skills to play professionally?
Yeah. So I think breaking into esports, the advice I always give is, what are you the best at and how can you transition that, right? Because people think of esports, they're I have to be a pro player or I have to be a coach. And it's pretty limited. If you expand the scope of what esports is, it's an entertainment business, right? At the end of the day, entertainment requires a lot of things to run. There's production, there's, graphics, there's social, there's all these things that, you can be involved in. If you look at almost any job posting, website, you go to your hit markers or just team websites, there's so many different roles. That's how it's just getting your foot in the door. So if you're a graphic designer, what are you doing differently? How are you bringing a unique approach to esports? And what is it that you're the best at? You pitch yourself on that, market yourself that way. I think you have a much better opportunity to get your foot in the door, because that's really what it is. Once you're in esports, you kind of don't leave. You're always in. People know who you are. You're just kind of attached. You're stuck forever. It always pulls on you. But yeah, if it's getting into esports, being part of a team, being part of a publisher side, there's multitudes of opportunities, I think, on that front. If you're asking a bit more specifically on the competitive side, which I think sometimes people tend to look at, that's a bit harder to do, just because you have to display value to professional players, and that's very, very tricky. In my case, for a performance coach, it was I had a structure and a system that I was going to bring to the team that seemed like it was something at least worth trying. And it happened to provide value. Some of the players didn't see it right away, but afterwards, they've come back and say, hey, this was actually really helpful for me. I really appreciated it. And they recognize it a little bit further down the road. So I think for competitive, you really have to showcase that value that you can bring to a team. Why is it worth paying you a salary when I could just be getting a better player? how are you min-maxing? Where's the percentage that I'm improving with you here at this organization? So I think that competitive side is a little bit tricky, but I think for the broader esports ecosystem, there's plenty of jobs. So like whatever you think you want to do, like you could probably find it in esports.
Yeah, I think so much focus is placed on the competitive side that a lot of these front office or developmental roles are kind of slept on. Do you think teams are casting a wide enough net for these roles, or are they missing out on some talent possibly?
I think you inevitably miss out on talent when you cast a net. For us, like when we were looking for a head coach, like we made a public job posting, which I think is a bit weird for esports. And we got some interesting candidates that I don't think would have ever been interviewed had it not been a public job posting. We had some referrals, and I think those just exist in any business you're in. But I think having the post public allowed us to see, like, okay, here's kind of the band of people we're going to get. Here's what our reach is, and even then, we were still missing people. But I think you get to see, like, you actually get to make an informed decision. And sometimes somebody surprises you, people who don't necessarily have the experience that you would expect. So you're like, oh, that's a pleasant surprise, and you might end up in a conversation with them. Maybe it doesn't work out, but at the same time, like, most of the time, people are grateful if they even had the opportunity when you cast that kind of net. So I think organizations should cast it when you have the time to look for something, unless you know ahead of time, like you want this and nothing's going to change your mind, then, that's your prerogative. But
Yeah, for sure. On a related topic, what do you think about institutional investors taking stakes in esports organizations? I know Meg Whitman is on the board of Immortals. Lionsgate on your jacket, they're a big investor as
yeah,
well. Yeah. What's it like having these outside investors?
I mean, it's great. I mean, it really scales up the operation that we're able to, undertake. I think, franchising was the big step for that, when you can commit and you're not worried about losing your spot in a league, and you could have a set path towards like monetization and actually, revenue share agreements. I think, it really just helps scale things up in esports. So it's been, it's definitely been good in that regard, because we can see what it is like at, its peak, I think. It's still growing, obviously, but, I don't think this would have been possible without these types of investors coming into the space and, making these things possible. So I think it's been overall positive.
That's great to hear. So esports is kind of in a weird place right now with the pandemic, where
Mhm.
from everything I see, viewership numbers are through the roof, but a lot of media and ad spend has gone down. Which a lot of teams rely on for revenue. So you think these trends reverse in 2021, or where do you see this going?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think on the media side, I would have to say like the market, a bit saturated, considering like everyone's been trying to convert to digital and engage the space. And we're at an interesting point now where I think a lot of people have made that shift, and now we're going to see the evolution of like the in-person events. I think as COVID has, especially just in California, speaking from experience, like we've gone down. Cases have been down like 90% over the past like week. The 7-day average. So we're expecting like counting to start opening up in the next couple of months, I would say, with the vaccinations ramping up. So sure, the digital market gets a bit saturated, but then like now you have this open space and people are going to be clamoring back to go to the live events as well. So I think it'll definitely be interesting. I think the trends, they won't ever hit back to pre-pandemic. I don't think you're going to get to like pre-COVID types of scaling, but I think you're going to see a bit more diversity in like who's going to stick primarily to digital platforms, who's going to try to capitalize more on the live events and the returns there. So I think that'll be an interesting thing we'll see in the next probably like 6 to 8 months. Is who's going to stick to digital, who's going to like convert to back to live events, and how is that going to impact the market share, and who's really going to be like leaders in those categories.
Yeah, that's all. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of all of this for sure. All right, so to wrap things up, I've got a few rapid fire questions for you. I don't know if you're playing the sleeper LCS fantasy, but what is your ideal starting 5 LCS fantasy team right now?
My ideal starting fantasy team: Revenge, Xerxes, Insanity, Raze, and Destiny.
I love it. I love it. Which LCS player do you think is the fastest mile time?
Fastest mile time? Oof. LCS player. I will say, I'll say Sven. Sven's Jack. He's probably the fastest one. We'll go there.
He looks like he can run for sure.
Yeah.
Top 3 dinner guests, dead or alive.
Top 3 dinner guests that are alive. Bill Gates, Barack Obama, and I think Guy Raz. He used to host the Hidden Brain podcast on NPR, which I listen to. So
it's an interesting dinner table.
A bit discrepancy, yeah. A bit of a discrepancy. 2 world leaders essentially, and a podcast guy.
Podcaster. There you go. Okay. You can only play one game for the rest of your life. What is it?
StarCraft Brood War.
Love it. That's where I learned how to type and play video games. Yeah. Okay. So last question for you is who else would you like to see on our show?
Who else would I like to see on the show? Nate, who are some past guests you guys have had that or unless this is like
this is episode 2. So
all right, who is the past guest? Give me some.
The first guy we talked to was Ismail Pedraza. He's the performance coach of Rogue Gaming. So
Gotcha. I would say I don't have a specific one, but I think you know, probably Chris Greeley, if you could get him, would be a really good one. Commissioner for the LCS.
also a
Just
former lawyer.
also a former lawyer, yeah. Just a bunch of legal guys, honestly. I think Chris would be a good one.
We're gonna have to work hard to get him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
busy
Okay.
schedule over there.
Yeah. Any parting words for Immortals fans or LCS fans alike?
No, I mean, just for the Immortals fans that are watching, thanks for being supportive and join our Discord. Hopefully, we can our coaches always stop in there after the games to talk about stuff. So we try to be pretty transparent with what's going on the IMT side. So if you want some more info, you can go follow us on that.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks for joining us, Mike. Good luck to you and the Immortals squad the rest of the split. Really impressed with what you guys have done. Seems like you guys are turning things around this year. So good luck with the path going forward.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.